Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's fitness programs, and I've been in business since 1994. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the real deal of what really works, and most importantly, why it works, hence the name Method to the Madness. Today, I'm going to talk about the difference between shooting a rifle or shooting a shotgun. But believe it or not, this all has to do with physical fitness. Before I get to that, let me thank Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They are committed to providing the highest level of home selling, and they have the sales and the reviews to back that up. They are out here to sell your house. That's a fact. Give them a shout, 386-451-2412. So let's dive in and talk about the old difference between a rifle, and I really hope I'm saying this right. I definitely understand the shotgun part, but I'm not really a gun guy, so if you want to say that I have that wrong, go for it, but you'll get the idea once I explain it. So if you're trying to hit a target, you can hit it with both types of guns, right? A shotgun releases shells and it's probably going to hit the target. And then a rifle will shoot a bullet, or a sniper will shoot a bullet and it's going to hit the target. So both of those types of weapons work. They hit the target. The big difference between the two is one of them is going to leave far less collateral damage, and that's going to be the bullet or the rifle or the sniper rifle versus the shotgun, which will hit the target most likely, but also hit a lot of other things close to the target as well. Well, guess what? That's what goes on when we train as well. There's a lot of misconceptions about training out there. There's a lot of people that will say, well, some people can train a lot harder than others, and we don't need to train that hard. And other people will kind of go in the complete opposite direction and kind of become more minimalistic in their thinking and training and push that. But here's what we know. And the biggest thing that I've always done in my career is I like to talk about the spirit behind the laws and not necessarily the laws. I mean, the laws are very simple, like in all things, right? I mean, a law is a law. A fundamental is a fundamental. An acute program variable in the case of physical fitness is an acute program variable. For example, there's sets, there's reps, there's loads when it comes to strength training, and then there's frequency, there's intensity, and there's time when it comes to cardio. All these things are true. Those are the acute program variables that help trainers and coaches design effective workouts. All that's well and good. But I've always believed that, at least for me and the way I like to train people, I like to go beyond that, and that's probably why I named the podcast The Method to the Madness in my first book, The Method to the Madness, because those acute program variables are there for a reason. They're there to help you do what you're supposed to do, but you really kind of need to understand what you're trying to do, all right? So in the case of training, and I gave you the examples of the person who believes that they can just train, and that's the way to get better. And then at the far end of the spectrum, there's the minimalistic person who thinks, the minimalist thinks that they can just do the very bare minimum and get by. And here's the thing. They're both right. The fact of the matter is, if we could get away with long, hard training all of the time, that would be best. All right. Now, I don't want people to be misquoting this, because If you just hear that, you think that that's what I'm advocating, but that's not what I'm saying. But the truth of the matter is, if you could get away with it, I mean, that is ideal. The person who can push as long and as hard as possible is going to get the most cardiac adaptations for cardio, and they're going to get the most morphological adaptations for strength training. But here's the thing, you can't. There is collateral damage. You flat out can't. You just can't. You are going to overtrain. And there's many systems that you can overtrain. There's the endocrine system where your hormones get out of whack. There's the central nervous system to where literally your brain function gets out of whack. There's the morphological system, so the muscles get overtrained. There's the skeletal system, so the tendons, ligaments, and bones get out of whack. So we simply can't. All these systems will get damaged if we overtrain. And overtraining is a real thing. So what we really need to learn how to do is how do we get right up to that point? And it's going to change as the years go by. It's going to change based on a lot of different factors. And I think that's what makes it so difficult, because there isn't a black or white system that people can jump into. There just isn't. You have to learn how to listen to your body. Now, there are things that will help you learn how to listen to your body. So there's planning that we can do. So when we simply say things like, don't train hard every day, that will help the average person figure out that they can't train hard every day. Now, again, though, I want you to understand, it's not because it doesn't work. It does work. It hits the target. The problem is there's collateral damage. When you're young, when you're 20 years old and you have all the hormones on your side and you have hardly any residual joint or tendons or ligament fatigue built up, you can get away with a lot more. But as we age, we can't. So it's not that it doesn't work. It does work. The problem is there's going to be collateral damage. So there are tools that we use, like periodization is one of those tools. And that's just a fancy word for saying that we are planning out the progressions. We are thinking with the long term in mind. We're thinking about the end result, and then we're breaking it down into harder weeks, harder days with recovery weeks thrown in there. That's periodization. So for example, some athletes might train hard for 3 weeks and then take the 4th week as a recovery week every month. That's periodization. That's been shown to help. But none of these things help if you're not listening to your body, if you're not understanding what is really going on. Everybody has their ideal amount that they can train, their ideal amount of frequency, their ideal amount of intensity, their ideal amount of volume. We all have it, and it's going to be different for everybody. So how do we start to pay better attention? I mean, part of this is we have to understand what leads to results. We have to understand that we do get better when we stress the system, for sure. If we want to run faster, we are going to have to spend time running faster. If we want to get stronger, we're going to have to use more weight. So we do have to apply the principle of specificity, which states whatever you're specifically looking for, you have to specifically train for. So that means, let's say you're an endurance athlete, so you are into doing triathlons and things of that nature. And now we've come up with a kind of a better term for all that because so many people are doing different forms of cardio and strength training, and we call that hybrid training. But if you're into that, there's also specificity in that. So if you're training for something longer, like a really long endurance event, then you have to put the priority on going further and not necessarily harder. If you're training for shorter volumes or shorter distance races like 5Ks and things like that, then the emphasis is more on intensity. So we do have to understand how all that works and practice the principle of specificity for sure. So we have to understand what gets us where we want to go. But then we really have to learn how to listen to our body. We can come up with the greatest training plan in the world, which factors in all these different things, like an easier day is going to follow a harder day. A fourth week is going to follow 3 weeks of training. We could do all those things, which are great. We can practice good buildups, meaning that we only increase by 5 or 10% per week on the things that we're doing. And that's true inside the gym or out. So we can practice progressive overload in the gym by only increasing the weights by 5 or 10% as we go up. We can practice the good art of not increasing two things at one time. These are all things us trainers talk to you about not overtraining. But we do have to pay attention to the body to see what really works and come up with your own ideal plan. So many people just follow what other people do. And you have no idea, number one, if it's really working for them. You don't know. And number two, you don't know if that particular way is going to work for you. The best thing you can do is start where you are, start to practice progressive overload, and learn how to listen to the body. See if it is working or not. So how do we do that? Here's some very simple things to pay attention to. Are you getting better? Like, if you're training for endurance, is your endurance able to improve? So maybe every week for 3 weeks, as I said, and then the fourth week can be a back off week, but every week you're able to go up a little bit and you're able to do it. Okay, that's a good sign. When you're going to the gym, are you getting stronger? Or are you doing more repetitions? I mean, these are pretty cut and dry things. Are you getting better? If you're not, and you feel like you're training appropriately, you could be slightly overtrained. How is your sleep? Is it impacted? Have you been training rigorously, really hard, and then all of a sudden you notice that your sleep patterns are off? Now, this is mostly geared towards people who are really training for different sporting events, different triathlons, running events, or really hitting it hard in the gym with a goal of performance really on their mind. The likelihood of overtraining is real and very possible. So this is really geared towards that. But if you've been noticing basically you're pushing yourself harder or you're going harder and your sleep levels are impacted, that could also be a symptom and sign of overtraining. Here is the biggest one. Do you dread your workouts? Now, this isn't for somebody who dreaded them all along and we can barely drag them into the gym with an appointment. No, I don't mean that. You've always dreaded it. That has nothing to do with you or with the training. That's just you don't like to work out. This is for people that normally love to work out. They normally love to run. They normally love to go to the gym. They normally love to swim, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden, they notice themselves basically not really wanting to go, not being overly fired up. Well, your body's trying to tell you something. Your body's trying to tell you that you're not really feeling up to it. If you lose your passion or your desire to train, you are probably overtrained. Now, here's the problem with these last three I gave you: the inability to sleep, the lack of performance, and the not wanting to work out. It's basically too late. Like, you are overtrained, and it's going to take some time off before you start to feel better. So you really want to learn how to tackle this before you get to that point. All right. And then another thing you could look for is your resting pulse elevated? That's another sign of overtraining. So we really need to think about the spirit behind the law on all these things. yes, we have to train hard if we want to improve. But also, yes, if we train hard, we could get ourselves on the edge of overtraining, and then we're not going to get better. We're just not. I mean, if you train yourself to the point of overtraining and then injury, there's nothing worse than cutting your gains down than an injury. It'll stop you in your tracks. You basically have to almost start over once you recover, and it's really hard to continue to improve when you're hurt all the time. So you really have to try to pay attention to it before you get to that point. Now, one quick thing, and I'm going to explain what steroids are. And no, I'm definitely not an advocate of steroids. I'm just going to say this. They work, and that is why they work. Like in the 1970s was the big boom of bodybuilding out in Muscle Beach in California. And all the famous bodybuilders were training and training and training. And then that's when bodybuilding boom really took off. You know, Schwarzenegger and all of the great legends really took off, and it became mainstream. It became a lot more mainstream than it was. The problem with that was so did all of their workouts. Everybody started seeing how these guys train. They wrote books. They talked about it in magazines, featured in magazines, and everybody started to follow the legendary workouts that these guys were doing in Muscle Beach, which were an easy 3 hours a day of training, basically 2 days. So in the morning and in the evening, they would train different muscle groups. They would train roughly 6 days a week. They were doing at least 20 sets per muscle group when they worked out, an insane amount of training. And yes, of course it worked, right? But you know how they were able to avoid overtraining? They took steroids. That's what steroids do. They help you recover. That is what they do. So like if you get a skin rash or if you get sick and you get inflammation, what do? Your doctor puts you on a corticosteroid of sorts, right? And it knocks it out. That's what it does. It helps you recover. Now, naturally, I hope everybody knows you can't do that continuously because there's side effects to that too. But that's what steroids do. Now, these are different kinds. They take anabolic growth steroids, but they still help you recover. That's what they do. So you have to understand that that is why some people were able and are able to train so hard and so long. Are there side effects? Of course there are. And down the road, it could be, of course, very deadly. But that's why they're able to get away with it at the time. Now, that went into mainstream, and a lot of natural athletes started following what they were doing and then wondered why. Number one, they weren't really getting better because they couldn't recover in time. Number two, why am I getting injured? Well, you're trying to do workouts that, number one, you shouldn't have really tried to begin with because they're not for the natural athlete. But of course, they can't come out and say that at the time because it's not like you can sit there and confess you're breaking the law in a national magazine. Now, since then, of course, most of them, if not all of them, have come out and said that they were very foolish in those days and, you know, would do it differently. But that was then, this is now. So we have to understand that about steroids and how some of this overtraining started because people were following people that were taking things, all right? Now, my last tip on this is keep an exercise journal. If you do that, you can really pay attention to your signs of overtraining. You can write in your heart rates. You can write in your weight. You can write in your performances. You can write in how you feel. For example, you can come up with a 0 to 5 scale. 0, you feel awful. You didn't even want to go that day. 5, you felt great. And come up with something like that and rate your workouts, rate your days. That will help you really keep track of what works for you. Because the only way you're ever really going to learn what works for you is to write your own book. I mean, that's the only way. You're going to have to train, you're going to have to document it, and then you're going to have to objectively look back and go, okay, this was working. Or, I pulled my hamstring. Why? You can go back and look. You were probably on the verge of overtraining. All of the rules in the world aren't going to work for you if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. So the training journal is a great way to pay attention and help us to use our sniper rifle versus our shotgun. Because if we have collateral damage, we're not going to get better as we're trying to repair from being overtrained or injured. All right? Now let me thank all the voters that voted me for the second year in a row the best personal trainer by the Hometown News. I really do appreciate it that you sent in your ballot. Thank you very, very much. And now I want to thank our second sponsor, Overhead Door of Daytona Beach. They are simply the best with their garage doors and their customer service. Jeff and Zach Hawk are the owners, and they're awesome individuals. Please check them out at overheaddordaytona.com. See you next time.